Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic video. In this one I want to talk about potential story ideas that they could do as part of Avatar Studios. So the big thing is that we have the potential for all of these big projects coming forward with Avatar Studios. What stories will they actually go ahead and do? So what's interesting about this compared to, I suppose, other videos where I speculated about ideas for stories in the future is that we actually have sort of categories to break, different projects down into. Because with the announcement of Avatar Studios, they said they would be doing, first up, theatrical movies, so animated movies. There's going to be new series, that's the second thing. There's going to be spin-offs for Avatar, and then short form content. So 4 different things that they have said Avatar Studios are going to be making. The first project is going to be a movie, which gives us, I suppose, something to speculate off. And then highly likely that the second project is probably a series. And then we'll see what they do with regards to spin-offs and short form content. So let's just jump in with movies. So this is going to be the first project, I suppose, they properly put into production. It's unclear if this is going to be the first thing that ends up releasing, but at the very least, it'll be one of the first few things that gets released. I personally can't really think of too many ideas that I think would work, given that we're talking about an animated movie that is probably... The way they worded it is like a theatrical movie, which to me says it's going to be in the cinemas. So that immediately means that, okay, we can't get too obscure here. We can't get too, like, this is a cool reference to a character we know about or anything like that. So it has to have, like, large appeal. And in this case, I do think you have to really lead into that marketing side of things. And I can't see anything really except an Avatar The Last Airbender movie. Something related to Avatar The Last Airbender. And I've talked about this in my previous Avatar Studios videos, but I really do feel it sort of almost has to be the movie covering Team Avatar when they're older. Now, I don't think it necessarily has to be them in their 40s or anything like that. I'm thinking like early 20s, maybe mid 20s. You might go as far as even like early 30s or something like that. But somewhere in that range, just to have a more focused middle ground section of these characters' lives. People have been asking for content with these characters for years. The comics gave the suggestion that we were potentially going to get here eventually, but we haven't, and have since stopped continuing the story after the comic imbalance. So there's still a huge demand there. And while I don't think we're going to go into like an Avatar Book 4 situation, that's why I'm talking about this here and not as a series or even a spin-off series. I think what they'll do is that they'll sort of kick off Avatar Studios on the big screen. Big, major project in a big way by showing that, hey, you've been asking for this for years. Here is what we are going to give you. Here is the main adventure that happens to Team Avatar when they're older. It's this thing, huge, high-quality animation, major events for the characters and so on. That would be so impactful. And it's one of the few Avatar things that I think would be very, very easy to market as like the first movie from Avatar Studios, the first, Avatar animated movie. Just having that, you can actually properly put Avatar The Last Airbender as the title of the project. Because I think if you did a Korra movie, it would do very well, but it would only be a certain percentage of what an Avatar movie would do. And then if it is going to be its own new project, that brings up sort of the naming convention in that, sure, you can market it and say from the makers of Avatar and Korra, but you are going to have to call it something like Legend of New Avatar or something like that if it's a completely new idea. I think they will lean in this project specifically into Avatar. I think down a lot of the other avenues, the series, the spin-offs, the short form content, they probably won't feel the need to stick as closely to Avatar is our big thing, it's our main focus, But I think on a movie, to get as many people going out to the cinemas, a little bit of a tougher task than just watch this streaming service series. I think that's what they need. And obviously what they have going for them here is that they have a lot of options, because in the grand scheme of things, the little bits of flashback and details we heard about the characters' lives from Korra, as well as the early setup stuff from Imbalance, doesn't really get too heavily in the way of the middle of the characters' lives. You can really come in, and once you like plan it out effectively and are like, okay, at this point it makes sense that Bumi would be born, but like Kaya and Tenzin wouldn't be born, and so on. Once you get that sort of details right, you can just expand and flesh out the world at that point in time. Where is Republic City at this point? Has it properly formed yet? Have Aang and Zuko established it? Or what? What are they struggling with in these early days? Or what? How does the villain rise up? What makes this villain unique that you could do like a movie plot based around it? And in my mind, what they probably have to do is, I would go for special bender, but maybe potentially a bending technique we've never seen before. And someone rises up sort of out of nowhere, major threat, as like basically Team Avatar potentially in their prime, wanting to take on a opponent. I think about the only villain you could really do to challenge them is some sort of a spirit, or a specialized bender. Now, I don't think they're going to do Yakone, because we've already seen like the core of that story. So it probably rules out, okay, they probably won't go for a water bender necessarily, but and maybe not a combustion bender, but something else along those lines. Like I think potentially like really, really, really super powerful lava bender threatening Republic City would be kind of a cool thing to see the team maybe go up against. Again, like this movie, I suppose you would characterize it more on the basis of you get to see the ATLA team when they're older, rather than like the villain is going to stand out like super huge as this like best villain ever type thing. Because again, it's a movie. I think that's what they're going to do, because I do feel they will save new avatars and stuff like that for series or spin-offs of their own. So unless they have a very set story prepared, I'm not sure how much, like, especially as their first movie, you would want to go for, this is the debut of a new avatar, and how you actually go about doing that. The question, I suppose, beyond that is more, okay, first movie down, there'll probably be a second movie eventually. What do they do there? And this is where you maybe go like, okay, might they actually keep the movies aside to sort of be the Avatar projects? Like they want to always keep something going perhaps that relates to Team Avatar. And if the comics aren't going to cover the important content yet, if all the novels and stuff like that are covering other stuff, maybe the movies Avatar Studios makes can be more reserved for, here are your follow-ups to the series you have already. So instead of needing to do a spin-off show to continue Korra or something like that, we just do the movies will cover Avatar and Korra related stuff. I can see them going down that road, because I think it's probably a big step for Avatar Studios if they were to release a movie that is not Avatar or Korra in the cinemas and it do really well. But I think you need to establish that first. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. Kind of do, in a very simplistic terms, what Marvel did, basically, which is all these movies, get people invested in it through the movies that are like out there, mass market, and then you can start to do your series on streaming platforms. And I think that's kind of what they'll want to do, as like major Avatar movie, that's sort of what everyone wants. And then, Avatar Studios is doing other stuff, but on the streaming platform, I'm going to check that out. But it doesn't have to be Avatar related anymore. I think that's perhaps what I can see them doing. So let's move into new series. I think this is the other like more easier one to figure out. I think the fact that they've separated the idea of series and spin-offs, to me, says that What a series is, in their perspective, is an Avatar or Korra. They are Avatar series. That a series in Avatar probably has to revolve around an Avatar, and might end up following the format that they've sort of had so far, which is ATLA followed an air Avatar, Korra followed a water Avatar. The next show probably will follow an Earth Avatar. Now, does it necessarily have to be the Avatar after Korra? I don't think so. I can see the appeal of wanting to have sort of 4 avatars in a row. The thing that would maybe make me lean away from that, especially this early on in Avatar Studios, is that I don't think they're going to want to maybe go down too far down the road of even more heavily advanced technology. Which, if you're going to go past all of Korra's life and then get to a point where a new Avatar is old enough to be the main character of a series, and then especially if you do the follow-up after that, you're talking another, like, potentially 100 to 200 years into the future. And I think we're getting a little bit too close to more modern technology, which I think they might want to explore eventually, but I think they might more want to focus on developing the universe that they have so far. So I think Korra continuation is probably about the most we can look to in terms of going forward in the timeline. So I think a good idea, at least in my mind, would be that you still follow the cycle of you want your first 4 series to be the elemental cycle, but you take the second half of that cycle and place it somewhere else in the timeline. I'd love to go back and cover, like, here's an Earth Avatar from somewhere in the gap between Wan and, like, Avatar Zito, which is more or less one of the furthest back avatars from Korra that we've met, who's not all the way back to Wan. So you've got this massive, like, nearly 9,000 year gap that we basically know nothing about. Just place an Earth Avatar somewhere there. Tell their story across your whatever amount of seasons, 2 to 4 seasons, however long you need. Then you do your next series as the Avatar after that Earth Avatar, the Fire Avatar, to end the first 4 series of Avatar. That way, you have that connective tissue between those 2 series because it's set in this specific era. That you're not jumping around too much just for the sake of it, but instead you have Avatar and Korra sort of together as this timeline of, like, that includes the war, the genocide into the war, end of war into Republic City, the threats Korra dealt with, the spirits afterwards and stuff like that. That's one era. Here's this other era that might, say, include something like, here's where the Southern Water Tribe formed, stemming off from the Northern Water Tribe, or some other major sort of worldwide events that sort of took place at that point. I think that would be something really, really interesting to do, to see them basically really establish another, like, major era of Avatar in that way. Because I think everyone has the idea of, yeah, we'll do a series set here, focus on this Avatar, but what if we really plan even further ahead and plan, we'll cover these 2 avatars in a row to really capture the feel of this era. What this Avatar didn't quite accomplish, but the next one is ready to pick up. And you get your transition between an Earth Avatar into a Fire Avatar, properly, explored in a series. That seems really cool to me. Now, I think the easiest way that you can you almost have a lot of the world building type stuff written for you already is to go very early, very close to Wan. Because if you do that, you are straight away exploring the very early foundations of the world as we know it. How did the nations form in the aftermath of, like, the Line Turtles leaving, the era of the Avatar beginning, and that big war between most of humanity? Air Nomads didn't seem to be involved. How did that come about? How did the Avatar, how did the world, deal with the idea of, like, oh, look, Wan was this really, really impressive person, but then he went away. But then a few years later, this other person rose up with the same skill set. And, how maybe explore an avatar who's within the first, 5, 6, and really hit home this idea of like the word avatar. People don't really know what it means just yet. That they have a sense for like, okay, it seems to be this like reincarnation cycle, but everyone's sort of different, but it's the same skill set and it's very memorable. And like maybe where does that come from? How do people suddenly begin to like revolve around the avatar and realize that this is this like eternal thing that just keeps happening again and again? And then yeah, like it gives you the option then to like maybe continue to use that art style that they used for beginnings, because it's a much earlier period in the Avatar's world. That is definitely something that they could do. Now, they don't have to lock themselves more towards Wan's time. Like I said, you've got a lot of ground. You could do set it like just before like an Avatar Zito or stuff like that. You could choose to set it more somewhere in the middle, like right in the middle of the timeline that we have, like 5,000 years after Wan, 5,000 years before Korra. That's like an interesting point, just like dead middle of the timeline as we know it. That way you're kind of like, you've done a lot of your foundational world building through Wan's era and stuff like that, but you're not quite at modern era where it's pretty much, like the kind of Kyoshi style stuff where you can see like the Dao Fei bandits are sort of the main focus in terms of a threat to the world, but then the Fire Nation is beginning to set up it being in a position to then invade the world. This way you're still thousands of years before that even happens. And that would, I think, they would have to be creative to find a way to make that feel unique. Like, what is not quite Wan's era, but not even as far advanced as like Kyoshi's era in terms of something we've actually focused on quite heavily. In that you've got even less technology, and you have, I suppose, like I talked about, those bigger world building events that we sort of roughly know about in the Avatar universe, like the fact that the Water Tribe originally was the Northern Water Tribe, and then the South formed from that, and then the Foggy Swamp Tribe formed after that. You have like the history of Ba Sing Se, that the old catacombs were what Ba Sing Se was originally. The big city that's like above ground is a separate thing. Like, I'd love to see some more kind of placement put on some of that stuff. Maybe it's a little bit, pulling a few topics that are too deep here. But this is what we're sort of looking into right now in terms of Mike and Brian specifically in there. I think EW quote to EW about it, about the whole Avatar Studios project, did mention that they basically they feel that there are so many like avenues and paths to go down to flesh out Aang's world, that they really got across that they are looking into like times and eras in the Avatar universe that they think it would be interesting to tell a story in. And from a fan perspective, it's this, and this that I think stand out the most to me. So of course, for me, from a lore perspective, of course, anything that is close to Wan's era is going to be fascinating to me to see a lot of that really, really early stuff. And like I said, like just any of that sort of transitional time period stuff seems really fascinating to me. I'd be very surprised if they chose to make one of these series based around, say, like an Avatar we kind of know about right now. So I'd be shocked if the new series was a Kyoshi series or a Zito series, or even someone like Salai, who was only like name dropped for the most part in the Kyoshi novels. I'd be a little shocked if that happened. I think maybe that stuff is more maybe where they'll do the spin-off or maybe the short form content. But I am taking it as the series probably still is very much the Avatar is going to be the main character, and that this is our major fleshing out of the world, our major series, our basically era defining events are these. The movies are your big like flashy, you get your 90 minutes of like, here's the plot, here's the villain, here's the story, here's the action, boom. But the series are what's really going to flesh things out. So that kind of, I think, explores most of that. Now, briefly on going back to, might they go Avatar after Korra? They might. They might see that as the most creative avenue to go down. That because of the technology, because you might be getting into technology surpassing the need for bending. Technology is better than bending. And that's a very interesting theme to explore potentially. The only argument I would make is just that I don't think we've quite had enough of kind of ATLA era Avatar or pre-ATLA era Avatar where we're not really dealing with technology. Bending is the focus of the series. We haven't quite had enough of that we're ready to go full on sort of technology and how the world interacts with technology is going to be like a theme of the series. We can get there. We can get there eventually where potentially even the idea of the Avatar is a thing of the past, that no one really respects it because what role does it play in the world when technology is the big thing? That's a cool idea. And I think that's maybe something for more a few years down the line into Avatar Studios. But who knows? It's something that I think could be on the table because they might want to do 4 avatars in a row, starting with Aang and getting up to a fire avatar. After the Earth Avatar, who's after Korra. They might want to do that. Let's move into talking about spin-offs. This is probably the area where we'll perhaps see the most variety, and each one is really, really different than everything else. This is the one where probably anything is up for grabs here. I could see them doing like adaptations of some of the comics as like a spin-off potentially. You might see your Kyoshi spin-off because they know how popular she is. Because again, Kyoshi's story hasn't been fully told just because of the bits and pieces we have from ATLA and the 2 novels. The novels still end with her as a teenager. Like there's still like 200 plus years of her life where a lot happens. And especially the later stages of her life, which we didn't even focus on at all, there's ground to work with. And so I think a spin-off series, which I'm taking more or less to sort of be almost like mini-series type thing. There might be ones where they decide this is going to get a season or 2, but I don't think these will quite be as, I suppose, meaty as the series. So I think this is perhaps where the likes of, people really locked and latched onto the stuff from the Kyoshi novels. Let's give them more Kyoshi here. Let's give them like a little bit more Avatar Korra. Some of these avatars where we've already sort of told and mentioned a lot of the main things about their arcs, but here's like an adventure with that avatar, just to flesh them out a little bit more. Have more of them in animation as the focus of something. That could be an option. Just some sort of a like Avatar anthology type thing where they just, okay, here's like say 10 avatars who weren't the most important avatars across the history of the world in terms of they weren't an Aang, they weren't a Korra, that sort of thing. They weren't involved in like the absolute major kind of events that shaped the world. But all of the avatars had something important happen to them. Here's the avatars who maybe aren't worth doing a full multi-season long series about, but we'll do an anthology show that just focuses like one episode on this avatar, one episode on that avatar. Expand out the avatars that we have. That's one thing that probably is the thing everyone is going to be talking about when it comes to speculation about new shows in the Avatar universe, is just really flesh out the amount of avatars that we have, because considering the potential for how many there is, and it's very unclear about the exact numbers, and that like if you take it super literally, there's like at least 1,000, but if there's at least 1,000, that doesn't really make a lot of sense given that Wan is the first avatar and so on, and the timeline that we know about. Was there 1,000 avatars in just 10,000 years? I don't quite think so. So 1,000 is a little bit of an extreme example. So you're probably looking at the answer for how many avatars there actually is at being somewhere between, like, let's say, somewhere between 100 and 200 avatars. We know, like, a few avatars. Like, we really don't know that many avatars. So let me attempt to name them all here that we know. So going from like most recent backwards. So Korra, Aang, Roku, Kyoshi, Karuk, Yang Chen, and then you get into there was also Zito, Salai at some point. You have the unnamed avatar that Hundun fought, which is very unclear. So like what we know about, like what's that 9 avatars was that that we went through there. Now of course you can look at certain scenes from the show and you get at least the visuals for a couple of avatars, because you see during like book 2 the pathway of avatars from a spiritual perspective and them all going away as they're destroyed. You get more of a visual sense of them, but we don't have names for like basically any of those characters. So that's one of those things, like that the fact that like we know like 10 or below avatars, and that's stretching it to include an avatar who only has one unnamed event that relates to one of the video games, and then basically a name drop new avatar from the Kyoshi novels. So lots of ground to work with avatars for sure. But I think the spin-offs are where we're going to see, I think, a lot of stuff where finally we will get avatar series where the focused upon character is not an avatar, which is it's actually a really interesting concept, because I think everyone has imagined the story where the main cast are just relatively normal people, and the avatar is really a celebrity within their story. That, yeah, sure, we get the idea. Aang is a celebrity within his story, Korra is a celebrity in her story. But truly, the avatar within their story, their era, is treated as like a legendary figure. You have to wait to see this character. This character turns up to save your characters from the most like deadly situation they've been in. Just that cool factor of the avatar is not the main character that we know everything about. The avatar is a legendary figure in the world to these characters. Really bring the scope down and have it just be a group of people from this normal town who are just like maybe middle of the road benders. There's nothing too crazy going on, and they're just going on like a relatively small quest, small adventure, but something happens and at some point the avatar gets involved, but they don't remain a major part of the series. You maybe learn about them from like a lore perspective of like, oh, it's this avatar, like they've been so incredible, I've heard this and this about them. Then you actually get to meet them towards the end, and just like, okay, cool. That was really cool. I'd love to hear something like that. See a series that is more like that. So just anything that is like not immediately Avatar focused or related, I think is cool. You could always go down like the Mandalorian path, but for Avatar, and kind of have a more sort of bounty hunter focused shows. Like we've seen bounty hunters within the show. That would create like an interesting dynamic of just, you know, a character where you like you get to know them individually, their skill set, and the people they hunt also have like unique skill sets. That immediately presents your action, and then, you know, you just create a story around that in the same way that like The Mandalorian isn't crazy with the amount of character development that it has or world building. It's very much just a like, wow, I really want to see where this goes. Like there's some really interesting concepts going on here. That something more along those lines. I personally wouldn't mind seeing a series where the spirits are the main character. I think you could actually do, this would maybe do wonders for the era that we're currently in Korra, where the human spirit dynamic is one of those things where like you feel like that's what Korra has to deal with, but I don't feel we know the spirits well enough as like individual, as characters. Something to just give us a better sense for the spirits and just see how they interact, not in the presence of humans. That's something I'm particularly interested in. It might be a little bit too obscure and out there to commit to fully, but maybe featuring that as like a part of a series at some point, I think would be relatively cool. Like I've always considered the idea that like we're used to an Avatar having like a team of characters who all journey together, of like having your group of characters where like, yeah, you have your non-bender, you have your bender, your weapons expert or whatever, but then you also have a spirit as part of the group who's like with them, is friendly with the other characters, and there's like a closeness there. It's a spirit who can talk, you know, an I like spirit. I think that's perhaps something that we need, and it's an interesting one about where you could set that in terms of like, would it make a lot of sense to set it anywhere before Korra, but you know, potentially, you know, as something to just flesh out that topic. I think that's at least an interesting idea of something that you could cover on the same path. If you want to go into more of a heavy lore story, anything that involves the Line Turtles more than we know about right now, I think would be fantastic. Now that we know the backstory of the origin of the Avatar, it's sort of the origin of the Line Turtles and just insight into what the Line Turtles are really about is probably the main lore mystery that we have right now in the Avatar universe. Just further explanation of a lot of those topics, I think, would be something very cool to just get a better sense for, like, you know, the decision making of the Line Turtles, because they made a conscious decision to protect humanity from what was happening with the spirits. Why did they do that? Like, why did they act as like sort of the protectors of the world before the Avatar came into being? And, you know, where did they get the power of elements from? Where did they learn energy bending? Or is that just inherent to them? Just how old are the Line Turtles? And maybe get into a little bit of the sort of creation of the Avatar world. Are we getting a little bit too, like, really way too deep into the lore then? Probably. But I wouldn't mind fleshing out the Line Turtles at least, just a little bit. You maybe don't have to go into their exact origins, but just, I'd like something that includes the Line Turtles, just that little bit more. Spin-offs, I suppose, theoretically, is the place where we might see sort of what I would overall sum up as sort of like the backstory content that we want to see, which is like, we want to see Red Lotus characters' backstories. We want to see a little bit more of like Amon, how he came to learn, develop the technique, how he met Hiroshi, Zahir, Ghazan, Minghua, and Pali, like basically all of their backstories. The full Red Lotus backstory of like with Zhai Bao, when did that happen? Which is an interesting thing to think of, in that happens during the gap between Avatar and Korra. Like, I think a lot of people almost make the mistake of feeling that, like, oh, Red Lotus has been around ages just like the White Lotus. But no, it forms post-ATLA at some point in the gap between series. Like, Iroh, Bumi, those characters likely were around when Zhai Bao left. I want to see that event. That helps to give depth to the Red Lotus. And, like, that brings Unalaq in to develop a little bit more. Like, there's definitely grounds to cover that, because you've got a fascinating group of characters there who all have like a unique skill set, and just revealing this like secret backstory of them all and the full details about how the group formed would be really, really interesting and insightful to me. How they would do that, though, I'm not sure. It just feels a little bit like that seems more like something they do in a comic or maybe a novel, not perhaps a spin-off series. And I feel sort of similar about, say, like Iroh's backstory. Everyone wants to know more about Iroh, and there's so much room to cover with it, because it's not just the obvious stuff of Iroh, so you cover Liu Ten, so you cover Liu Ten's mother potentially. You go back even further and you cover his relationship with Ozai, because they've never interacted on screen. Show us what that dynamic is like, what their relationship like with their father, Azulon. And really go into that details to develop Ozai more, to develop Iroh more, really show us like who Iroh was before everything happened, and if he is overly different or if he's always been roughly the same. Those are the type of things that I think we want to see. And Liu Ten, of course, I want to actually see him be a character and not just, you know, the dead son of Iroh. I really would like to see the character of Liu Ten. But again, would that be a spin-off or what? Again, I've always felt that that's been maybe more of a comic about that, or a novel about that would probably be the way to go, more so than a series or a short a spin-off series. And this is where I suppose, like, this is why I think thinking about what exactly they could do as spin-offs or short story content, short form content, is the two more difficult parts of this whole project to actually consider. Um, because it feels like, just from a big perspective with the series and the movies, it's a little bit easier to pick out the stuff that would do well. Here, though, you probably do have more of an opening to cover, like, really more deep cuts and focus in a lot more on individual characters or locations and stuff like that. Which is why I say, like, yeah, bring Karuk in, bring Kyoshi in, do all that stuff. I think you have a lot of grounds to work with, and I think probably everyone at this point has come up with the idea. But you know, pro bending series. Do an Avatar sports anime that's just bending teams, pro bending teams, full sports anime style. It's not pro bending in the middle of, like, the most important event in the world going on, but no, just focus in on the tournament. What's going on here? Is there any sort of betting off-field drama stuff going on? But no, just focus in on that. Right in a more technical way, the battles, the tactics of each characters, and set it potentially during Toza's time. Incorporate him in there in some way. Make it maybe more about early pro bending days, to where, like, maybe you're not overly locked into having to be modern Korra, but you go into the past and you allow, okay, a few references to characters because of what you're dealing with, but it's pro bending, you know what it is, but a different era for Republic City. That sort of stuff, I think, is potentially where there are cool ideas, but not everyone likes pro bending. Some people really don't like it as a part of book one. Other people really love it. I personally really like it, so I wouldn't mind something like that. But how obscure are we, in depth are we allowed to go with these one shots? That's the main question. In that, if they wanted to, could they do a spin-off series that covers the formation of the Southern Water Tribe? Could they do one that focuses on, like, Bossing, say, when it was more of that underground city in the catacombs, those type of things? Could we go back to the time of Oma and Shu and actually, like, maybe properly tell that story as not a legend? Those type of things are sort of like where you're like, would they go that deep? Would they actually let them really just take a relatively maybe small part of the series and just go all out with it? That's what I'm not too sure about. The other thing here with spin-offs is that we probably have to think about demographics here as well. That I think we're all thinking about everything in terms of it being around the same level of Avatar and Korra. But I do think spin-offs is probably where we might see stuff like they might bring back the Chibi shorts and have more of a comedy kids-focused series. If the Dark Horse Comics are doing that, I can see them absolutely being willing to do that for this as well. That this is, this multimedia campaign basically with Avatar Studios. I can absolutely see them devoting some of these projects to maybe aim them more at younger viewers to bring them into the franchise, while I suppose still giving older, general fans of the universe something to grasp onto as well. I think that's a possibility for sure. Like, I wouldn't mind, like, maybe going like a series that maybe isn't as, like, intense as in depth, but it is maybe just like a younger set of characters where they are like maybe 7, 8, and they're like really just at that stage of like just learning and developing their bending skills. They're not at the kid prodigy level where they're kind of masters at an early age, but they've maybe just started training in their elements and something along those lines. That would be a kind of fun thing. Maybe it's not particularly continuity or story driven, and it is more of a just fun show where stuff happens. It might fit more to maybe being on the Nickelodeon channel. It comes to streaming, of course, but maybe this show they really do focus on quite heavily for Nick to be like an Avatar show that's not as continuity overly driven. I can see them doing something like that, because again, we're going to probably have different types of animation. We're going to have not everything is going to be done by like Studio Mir. We don't even know if Studio Mir will be on any of these projects because they're busy with the big Netflix deal that they had a while ago. I could see them, if they have any space, making the time to like come on one of these projects. So I wouldn't be surprised a few years down the line if we heard Studio Mir is back for a project. But realistically, I think for like the movies and the main series, they're going to want to keep the general animation style similar to Avatar and Korra. But for spin-offs and the short form content, I do think there are going to be more different styles, whether that be your chibi style or something that's more maybe flash based, like the Republic City Hustle stuff, or even just like maybe more webcomic style. I think we'll see that. We probably will see maybe a more Western style of animation. They might do a CG show somewhere along the way. I think that's what's going to happen with some of these more side project-y type ones. So I think that's important to keep in mind, the sort of demographics type stuff. Which is why I again, in the same way that the Kyoshi novels are YA, I wouldn't be surprised if like tonally they go in directions like that, where they might do a series that maybe is a little bit more of a romance, like just straight romance. It doesn't have the most like earth-shattering plot, but it's just meant to be a cute romance between two characters or whatever. That sort of thing. Let's get into short form content here. This is the last one and probably the most like arguably it probably has actually a lot of potential, but it's very unclear about what it is right now. I picture these definitely being the smallest projects. Obviously the word short is included. And based on the sort of short form content that we've seen in Avatar up to now, I definitely picture this as being more like Welcome to Republic City Hustle and Escape from the Spirit World, those type of things. And I do think it would be more Republic City Hustle style, where it is these 5-6 minute shorts that they put up on the website, or they can air on Nickelodeon or something like that. That they are these more support style things that they can have on their different platforms. Because again, the idea is that it's not just simply everything goes up on Paramount Plus and then we happen to have a movie, that there'll be a delay between being in the movies and being on Paramount Plus. They have all these other third parties, and like Nickelodeon as a TV channel still exists. So some of this stuff will be more like, okay, we can put this on TV. This can be our sort of web stuff to keep people interested in terms of free content that maybe goes up on YouTube. I definitely picture this as being the equivalent of a lot of this Star Wars stuff that you've seen go up on YouTube. Like, what is it called? Like a Galaxy of Heroes or something like that. I can't really remember them in particular, but I think Avatar, things like that, would actually be very interesting if they attempt to flesh out the world. Again, like, do you interpret this as being that sort of short content, or are they actually talking more like OVA type thing, where this is like a one-shot episode of this thing, where it's not a spin-off series, it's not a full series, it's not a movie, it's just a episode about this thing? Is that what we're talking about? That's what's not entirely clear. And I can maybe see this maybe being where they go down the more anthology path and do have, boom, here's a quick short with this avatar, quick short with this avatar. Or maybe this is the thing they decide to be very kid-focused, and they maybe leave the spin-offs to be different styles of series that the main series aren't going to be. That's what's so interesting about this, in that, like, everything really is on the table. Now, I think I skipped over talking a lot about adaptations, but like, say, the Kyoshi novels, will they adapt the Kyoshi novels as any of these projects? I'm not sure. I right now I kind of would lean towards perhaps not, But I also wouldn't be surprised, based on the popularity of those books, if they did something that relates to it, even if maybe if they follow it up. Like if we saw like a spin-off series that involves Kyoshi and then Rangi's in there as well, I think everyone will be all for that, to see like a character who we just met in the books, like Rangi, make their appearance in an animation. That would be very interesting. Similarly with the comics, like The Promise, The Search, The Rift, Smoke and Shadow, North and South, and Balance, even Turf Wars and Runes of the Empire. For Korra, will they want to do any adaptations type stuff to just have that there in like a big format like that? It's unclear. It really depends on how much they value like the fact that just these stories have already been told, we don't need to tell them again, or do they actually go like, wait, no, The Search, Zuko's mom, that's a very, very important story. We want to have that up on our streaming platform as like the answer to the question people had at the end of the series. That it is an unanswered thing from the show. Got answered in the comic, but we'd like to have an animation for that specifically. I can maybe see something like that, where The Search is this very special situation where it is the most important content the comics have like ever covered. They adapt that in some ways. Similarly, I can see them perhaps wanting to have something like a Turf Wars style thing in animation up, just to almost make up for the fact that like they didn't really get that chance to develop Korra and Asami at the end of the series. The best they could do was the ending that we got and just confirming that they're a couple at the end. Maybe they might want to do that animation thing that can finally really just be that extra add-on to the series that shows some of the stuff from Turf Wars, of like the kiss that everyone has kind of wanted to see in animation, that sort of thing. Runes of the Empire also feels quite important because Kuvira is still left active. Maybe they do want to do something like that. But I think with Korra, because they're still very early on with the comics, they have the ability to go back. They have the ability to jump in with the setup that this is set up and go from there. Which I suppose brings us back around to what I was talking at the start. I thought that the first thing that they were going to do is the movie probably will be something Avatar related. Now, the big question is that, and this is probably the biggest demand from most fans, is will there be like a series that is about ATLA characters or anything like that? Will they really flesh out the Avatar The Last Airbender characters? Like, will we get the gap between Imbalance and the characters where they are in Korra fleshed out properly? And I honestly feel that they will fill it in to some degree, but I don't think it's going to be the case where we get like a book 4, where it's this 3-4, where we get a full series, where we get this 3-4 book series that focuses on Team Avatar when they're older. I think they will stick to like a big movie project where everyone's just so excited to see the characters older, and then maybe a spin-off or some short form content that just hits a few little notes like that. And who knows, it really depends on the quality, the level of stuff they're doing in those short form content things. But that's kind of what we want, because like for me, like a lot of the questions I want answers to are just kind of little moments that just happen along the way. I want to see Aang finding the herd of sky bison. I want to see the emotional reaction of all of the characters. Appa's reaction, Momo's reaction, Aang's reaction, Katara's reaction to Aang reacting to finding new sky bison and lemurs. That would be a huge moment. I would like to see, even in just a short, official canon images of what was Katara and Aang's wedding like. Just a little thing that maybe sets up and goes over that. I'd love to see that. Zuko and Druk. Where did he get Druk from? Is it the egg from Firebending Masters or not? Something like that. Who wouldn't want to see just a quick little short of the Sun Warriors, like maybe sending word to Zuko. Zuko goes over, he picks up the egg again, it hatches in his arms or something like that, and there is the debut of Druk, basically. Druk being born. And then you have the other characters reacting to like, whoa, Zuko, you have a dragon now? Just those type of things where like, maybe it's very difficult probably to write a full series around sort of the sort of fan servicey moments that the fans want, which is why I do very much lean away from like a full series. So might they do just shorts covering maybe some of those key moments the fans want to see, more of an anthology series that just hits those big moments or not? I'm not sure. But I think at the very least, the main thing I take away from Avatar Studios as a just project for the future is just that we don't have to worry anymore about, like, if they do that, there won't be time to do this. So to me, everything is back on the table. Yeah, we can do an Avatar continuation. We can continue Korra. We can reference Kyoshi. And we can do a new Avatar and something else. It can all happen because, you know, I guess they have plans for years into the future with this. They want to, as Mike and Brian said, you know, cover different eras and the gaps that are there in the timeline, in the universe as it's been presented so far. To me, that says that, like, yeah, they're going to hit a bit of everything. Why wouldn't they hit everything when they know the universe is so rich and interesting and isn't particularly filled in? Because it's not. Avatar as a universe right now is ATLA the show, Korra the show, and like, what, 6 main Avatar comic series, 2 Korra comic series, 2 one-shots at the moment, and then 2 short story collections where only a handful of the stories are actually all that interesting. Then there's Republic City Hustle and Escape from the Spirit World. And all of that pretty much just covers stuff that is directly Avatar, Korra, and then Korra, of course, gave us the big, more fleshed out backstory that includes, like, beginnings from 10,000 years ago. And then anything else that covers, like, stuff that happens in the 10,000 year gap is just, oh, well, this Avatar, because they reference this famous Avatar, is somewhere here, but we don't know anything about what happened. And so on like that. Add in the Kyoshi novels, and at least, okay, there's Kyoshi's era fleshed out like a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, Kyoshi's era is still very close to Aang and Korra's era. So what about all this other gap before that? And that's always been my case to anyone who's kind of been like, oh, I'm a little worried that, like, we're maybe going to flesh out too many things, or, like, to me, the universe is done. They don't need to do anything more. I don't agree with that because there's so much ground to cover. And I just find it almost, like, silly to suggest that, like, the universe is done. Creatively, it's done already. I do not think that is the case. So there has been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. For each of those 4 avenues of story content, the movies, the series, the spin-offs, the short form content, what sort of things do you think they'll do for each of them? What style of projects do you think are probably off limits, probably that they won't do? And then which ones do you think are more likely for each of those type of things? But yeah, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.